Did you come here just for the money? You pool loser. Ugh, I am so over it. Just leave already.
I was taken aback by this sudden, aggressive remark from Emily, the granddaughter of Kevin, the company president. Even Kevin himself looked pale, seemingly wanting to say something but unable to find the right words. Her words were harsh, but what caught my attention was Emily's demeanor. Rather than looking like she wanted to belittle or oppress me, it seemed more like she was in a defensive posture, trying to avoid getting hurt any further. My name is Shane Williams. I'm in my 30s, working in the IT department of a metal processing company. It's a fairly large company in the area, so some of my old classmates tell me I've got a secure future and even envy me, but in reality, I'm full of uncertainties. The world is changing rapidly, and with the recent depreciation of the dollar and rising prices, companies like ours that import materials from overseas and process them are taking a massive hit. On top of that, technological developments are advancing at a fast pace, so if we don't focus on self-improvement and learning, we'll quickly be left behind. That's why, even if you work for a major company or one that's influential locally, it doesn't guarantee lifelong stability. Above all, what I fear most is becoming someone who isn't needed. A few years ago, I suffered an injury to my fingertips due to an accident. The accident happened when I came into contact with a machine at work. President Kevin Costner, who wanted to improve operational efficiency, had visited the work site with me and Frank, a young engineer, to plan for a new production line. We were discussing how to design an efficient workflow while looking at the actual machinery when Frank accidentally bumped into a tool. "Watch out!" I shouted and instinctively grabbed Frank's arm, pulling him back hard. In the process, I leaned forward and stumbled toward the machine that was processing parts. When I realized what had happened, I saw Frank and Kevin staring at me with pale faces.
Call an ambulance immediately. Shane, stay still and don't move. Someone, go get the doctor from the health center.
Frank, still pale, was trembling and couldn't speak. His gaze was fixed on my hand. When I looked down at my fingertips, I realized what had happened. At that moment, a sharp pain shot through me. The overwhelming pain and shock of what had happened to me caused me to lose consciousness on the spot. That accident left me with a disability in my pinky fingertip. Even though it's classified as a disability, it doesn't really affect my daily life. At first, I struggled with the fact that I couldn't use my pinky finger, but over time, I've learned to manage without it. In fact, I'm grateful that, despite how dangerous the situation was, I came out completely unharmed except for my finger. Losing the function of part of my body has made me more appreciative of my health and the ability to live my daily life without any issues. However, Kevin and Frank, who were present at the scene, still seem unable to shake off their guilt toward me. As the leader of the organization, and someone who was at the scene, Kevin feels a strong sense of responsibility, which makes his feelings of guilt even more profound. As for Frank, he was so deeply affected by the idea that I had been hurt in his place due to his carelessness that he avoided coming to work for a while. These days, he greets me with a smile, but I can tell he's always watching over me, ready to step in and help whenever I'm handling minor tasks or data entry. It's because of such kind and supportive colleagues that I feel secure at work. But even with this great environment, there's no guarantee this company will remain successful forever. The business is doing well now, but knowing that other companies in the same industry have gone under keeps us on our toes. If this workplace were to disappear, what would happen to me, a single man? That's the constant fear I live with. One day, Kevin called me into his office and, with a serious expression, said this:
Shane, I have a favor to ask. I'd like to introduce you to my granddaughter. Please, meet her sometime soon.
I was honestly baffled by the unexpected request. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I've never had a girlfriend. It's not that I'm completely uninterested in romance, but while I worked hard on my studies and extracurricular activities, I never had the experience of falling deeply in love or being head over heels for someone. When I was younger, I didn't think much of it, but by my mid-20s, I started feeling anxious about this side of myself. I used to think it'd be nice to get married someday, but as I approached my 30s, I started worrying that I might remain single for life. Determined to change, I tried reaching out to women through social networking sites with shared hobbies and attended matchmaking events to meet potential partners. Unfortunately, my efforts didn't lead to any success. I didn't fail to meet wonderful women, but I was so nervous I could barely speak and couldn't even ask for a second date. I never thought my lack of experience in romance would corner me like this, but after turning 30, I gave up on getting married and building a family of my own. Since then, I decided I would live alone for the rest of my life, and the thought of someone like me being introduced to Kevin's precious granddaughter never even crossed my mind, so it's only natural I was surprised by his proposal. Even though he's my company president, I couldn't easily agree to meet his granddaughter. I'm grateful to Kevin and appreciate all he's done for me, so I wanted to fulfill his request somehow. However, this wasn't just about me and Kevin. This was also about the life of his precious granddaughter. I slowly shook my head as Kevin looked at me with serious eyes. Kevin, I'm very sorry, but I have to decline. I'm already in my 30s, just an ordinary man, and to be honest, I'm not very confident in myself. As you know, I'm not very good with women. As I said this, I unconsciously rubbed my fingertips. I usually stop myself from touching my fingers in public. But with the gravity of this topic, I'd already done it before realizing it. Especially when meeting someone for the first time, I feel self-conscious about my fingers being different. Kevin must have noticed this habit of mine. With a sad expression, he looked at me and spoke in a soft voice.
I understand how you feel, but you're a much more remarkable person than you think. I know this because I've worked with you. Just meet her once. I want to introduce you to my granddaughter.
At first, I thought he was introducing me to his granddaughter out of guilt over my workplace injury. But from what Kevin said, I could tell he genuinely appreciated me to some extent. I was genuinely touched by his words, and given how earnestly he asked, I decided to agree, just once. However, I didn't want his granddaughter to have any preconceived notions about me. I asked Kevin not to mention my injury, and that I would explain it myself. That's how I ended up heading to the private dining room Kevin had arranged. We were scheduled to meet one-on-one, so Kevin wouldn't be there to help with the conversation. Even so, I felt pathetic for being this nervous about having a meal with a woman. She probably didn't think of this as anything long-term, but since she was kind enough to come for dinner, I didn't want her to leave feeling bored or disappointed. That thought made me oddly restless. I arrived at the restaurant, but even after the agreed time, Kevin's granddaughter didn't show up. I only knew her name was Emily. I wonder what kind of person Emily is. As I was thinking this, the door to the private room suddenly burst open. At that moment, I couldn't help but widen my eyes in surprise. To my astonishment, it was Kevin who walked in. As soon as he saw me, he apologized deeply.
Shane, I'm so sorry. I know you took the time out of your busy schedule, but Emily said she couldn't make it today.
Did something happen to her? Worried, I cautiously asked Kevin. Please calm down. Did something happen to Emily? Kevin looked at me apologetically and slowly shook his head.
No, that's not it, actually.
He seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to tell me, but eventually, he shared the truth with me. It seems that Emily suddenly decided she didn't want to attend the dinner today and informed Kevin at the last minute that she was canceling. Kevin tried his best to calm her down and persuade her to go, but she apparently refused outright. She must have felt uncomfortable about having dinner with a man in his 30s. For a woman in her mid-20s, having a one-on-one meal with someone significantly older could feel suffocating. I completely understood how Emily must have felt, so I spoke to Kevin with a smile. Kevin, it's okay. I totally understand how Emily feels. Having dinner with someone you don't know, especially when there's an age gap, can be pretty awkward. Kevin shook his head and said, that's not it, but he couldn't follow up with a reason. He probably knew I was spot on. That, in itself, was understandable and made sense to me. I deliberately spoke to Kevin in a cheerful tone. To be honest, having dinner alone with a woman is a bit nerve-wracking for me too. I was really grateful for your introduction, but I also feel a little relieved, so please, don't worry about it. I stepped out of the private room and spoke to the staff. After confirming that neither the food nor drinks had been touched, they told me I could leave without paying a cancellation fee. I informed Kevin of this, thanked him, and left the restaurant. The following week, when I went to work, Kevin came over to my desk. He mentioned he wanted to talk, and I guessed it was about the other day, so I suggested we move to another location. Eventually, we decided to talk in his office. The first thing Kevin did was apologize again.
I'm truly sorry about the other day. I had a serious talk with Emily. She seems to feel regretful, but I want her to apologize directly. I want her to grow as an independent and responsible adult. I hate to keep asking you for favors, Shane, but could you find a time to meet Emily again?
Kevin is incredibly earnest, both in work and in his personal life. He dislikes anything that lacks integrity, and if there's a mistake or misstep, he sets aside his pride and position to apologize sincerely. This attitude is one reason why he's so respected by his employees, and it seems he expects the same values from his granddaughter, Emily. I understood Kevin's feelings, but for me, just knowing how he and Emily felt was enough. Kevin, just hearing you say that is more than enough for me. Please, let's put this matter behind us. I'm sure Emily will have wonderful encounters in the future. Please forgive her for this. But Kevin still seemed unsatisfied. It almost felt like he was on the verge of tears and might plead with me, which made me concerned.
I made you feel uncomfortable with this whole situation, Shane. Of course, I still hope you could be with someone as wonderful as Emily. But more than that, as the one who raised my precious granddaughter, I want her to become a responsible adult. Would you please humor an old man's selfish request?
The truth is, Emily lost her parents when she was in middle school. After losing both parents in a sudden accident, she was consumed by grief. Kevin, who had already lost his wife early on, took in his teenage granddaughter and raised her as a single parent. His strong parental feelings were likely a big part of this. Understanding his sentiments made me feel inclined to meet Emily again. All right, but let's make this the last time. Please send my regards to Emily. Hearing this, Kevin looked visibly relieved. This time, we agreed to have a meal together with all three of us. and I left his office. On the day of the meeting, I headed to the restaurant, feeling less nervous than before. Since I assumed from the start that Emily wouldn't have high expectations of me, I didn't feel as much pressure. However, if she were looking forward to today, I'd be terrified of disappointing her. Emily probably sees today's dinner as a formality to settle things. To save face for Kevin, she'll have the meal, but she's likely planning to cut it short. While waiting for her arrival, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed Kevin's name. "Hello, good evening. Thank you for arranging today's dinner." Before I could ask what the call was about, Kevin spoke in a rushed tone.
Shane, I'm so sorry, over and over again. Actually, this time, it's my fault.
As I listened to Kevin explain, I learned that he hadn't been feeling well recently, had gone to the hospital that morning, where they found something concerning. Although he didn't share the specific diagnosis, I could tell from his tone that it could potentially be life-threatening, not just something that might impact his ability to work. He explained that he'd need to undergo further tests and asked if we could postpone today's dinner. After hearing this, I quickly returned to the office to make the necessary arrangements. Kevin's absence was undoubtedly a blow to the company, but we couldn't just sit idle. Some of my duties included accompanying Kevin to meetings with other companies, so I reviewed the schedules and identified what could be rescheduled or handled by me alone. Kevin already had enough on his plate with his health. The least I could do was lighten his workload. I updated the upper management, completed the necessary paperwork, and sent Kevin an email within a few days containing all the adjusted schedules and required documents. I also added a note saying that would provide all possible support even if he needed long-term hospitalization. That evening, my phone rang again. The caller was Kevin, and his cheerful tone immediately put me at ease.
I'm so sorry to have worried you. And on top of that, for all the work you did, Shane, I can tell you how much you've helped me.
Although I only did what was necessary, it seemed Kevin was deeply grateful for my actions this time. At first, his tone was light, but as the conversation went on, I could sense his emotions growing stronger. Then, Kevin said something completely unexpected.
Please take my granddaughter as your wife. It may sound strange for me to say this about someone I raised, but she's a kind-hearted girl. I'm just so worried because she hasn't had any good prospects.
If it were just about having dinner, that's something I could understand. But asking me to marry her is an entirely different matter. Maybe such arrangements were normal a long time ago, but deciding to marry someone you've never even met once is far from ordinary these days. Kevin must have been so upset that he wasn't thinking clearly. I did my best to stay calm as I responded to him. "Kevin, please calm down. Saying take her as your wife is a bit much. You need to respect Emily's feelings too. You can't bring two people together based solely on someone else's wishes. Above all, Emily's feelings should be the top priority." It seemed like Kevin understood that much, but he was still determined for me to meet her.
Of course, Emily's feelings are important, but I also need you, Shane, to feel comfortable with this. So please, let me arrange another meeting.
Since our previous dinner didn't happen, I agreed to honor my promise to Kevin. On the day of the meeting, as usual, I arrived at the restaurant early to ensure I wouldn't keep anyone waiting. Sitting in the private room with mixed emotions, I waited until Kevin and Emily arrived.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Thank you for coming today. Come on, Emily, say hello.
Emily turned out to be far more beautiful than I had imagined. Her elegant features bore a resemblance to Kevin. Her demeanor exuded grace and politeness, But Emily kept her head down and didn't say a word. Is she upset because she didn't really want to come today? Just as I was wondering this, Emily finally opened her mouth to speak.
You're just a pool loser who came here for the money, aren't you? Ugh, I'm so over this. Just leave.
I was taken aback by Emily's sudden, aggressive comment. Kevin also looked pale, as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. Her words were harsh, but what caught my attention was Emily's demeanor. Rather than trying to belittle or oppress me, it seemed like she was putting up a defensive wall, as if to protect herself from further hurt. Feeling unsettled by this, I turned to Emily and spoke. I have no intention of being here for money. But maybe there's a reason you think that way, Emily. If you're comfortable, I'd like to hear your story. Emily looked at me, surprised, and after a moment of hesitation, she slowly sat down. The room was filled with an awkward silence for a while, but both Kevin and I silently agreed to wait for Emily to speak. Finally, she broke the silence.
I said something terribly rude without knowing anything about you, Shane. And I also canceled at the last minute the other day. I'm very sorry.
Emily bowed deeply in apology, and her sincere regret was clear from her demeanor. Then, she began to share bits and pieces of her experiences. As it turned out, Emily had dated a few men before, but all of them seemed to have been interested in her wealth rather than who she was as a person. While Kevin had instilled strict manners and etiquette in her, his busy work schedule meant he couldn't spend much time with her. To make up for it, he gave her a generous allowance, which she used to pursue her interests. While Emily herself was content with that, it appeared her classmates were drawn to her for her financial means. Some of her exes would never contribute to the costs of their dates, while others demanded lavish gifts that were clearly beyond reason. Over time, Emily became convinced that men approached her not because they were drawn to her personality, but because they were blinded by her wealth. This led her to develop a deep mistrust of men. Emily then opened up about a sad part of her past that even Kevin didn't know. When her parents passed away in an accident, many relatives rushed to take her in. On the surface, they acted as though they pitied her, but in reality, they were more interested in the financial implications. Even distant relatives were vying for custody, but their language often revealed their underlying motives. Emily, who was at an impressionable age, was deeply shocked by this, and it left a lasting scar on her heart. With teary eyes and a pained voice, Kevin said,
I didn't want her to feel lonely or suffer, so I at least made sure she had enough allowance. But I now realize there were negative consequences to what I did. As for our relatives, I failed her there too. I swore I'd make her happy, and I went against their objections to take her in. But it seems I ended up causing her deep pain. I'm so sorry.
Emily, however, firmly responded.
No, Grandpa. I was truly happy to be taken in by you. It's not your fault that I turned out this way. It's mine. Even though Shane came here with an open heart, despite my terribly rude behavior, I decided from the start that he was just after money. That's on me.
In short, Kevin had done everything he could to care for his only granddaughter, while Emily's lack of positive relationships had driven her into mistrust. It wasn't a problem that could be solved overnight, but I spoke in an upbeat tone. It's clear how much you both care for each other. I believe good people naturally attract other good people. Emily, I'm sure you'll have wonderful encounters in the future. Though it might not have aligned with Kevin's original plan, today's dinner felt meaningful in its own way. The meal wasn't even finished, but I felt it was best to leave Kevin and Emily to have some time together. Thank you for today. I just remembered some work I need to finish, so I'll excuse myself. With that, I stood up and began preparing to leave. Kevin and Emily exchanged glances, and then Emily smiled at me and said,
Thank you for today. I'd like to get to know you better, Shane. If you're willing, could we meet again sometime?
I was stunned by her words, completely unprepared for them. My body temperature suddenly rose, and my face turned bright red. As I fumbled for words, unable to speak, Emily laughed and pulled out her phone.
If it's a hassle, feel free to block me, but for now, how about we exchange contact information?
Her cheerful demeanor was such a stark contrast to our first meeting that I felt my heart waver. Clumsily handling my phone, I managed to exchange contact information with her. When Emily said, "We'll be in touch," I somehow managed to respond before leaving the restaurant. A few weeks later, I received a message from Emily, and we ended up meeting one-on-one. Although I hadn't been nervous at all during our previous dinner, today, as I waited at the meeting spot, my palms were sweaty, and my heart raced. It had been a long time since I felt this way. Trying to calm myself, I told myself she wasn't really interested in someone like me. This was probably just a way to pass the time. That thought helped me regain some composure. But when Emily arrived, my heart started pounding all over again. At our previous dinner, we'd both been dressed formally, but today, Emily wore a stylish outfit befitting someone in her mid-20s. She looked so stunning that anyone passing by would turn their head for a second glance. When she spotted me, she jogged over with a bright smile.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Shall we go?
Even though it was my first time going out with her, I had no idea where to take a woman on a date. I didn't know any trendy places or where women might enjoy spending time. I had admitted this honestly during our earlier conversations, and Emily had kindly offered to choose a lunch spot. So today, I relied on her suggestion, and we went to a restaurant she wanted to try. It was an Italian place. I expected it to be expensive, but surprisingly, it was quite affordable. Even though it wasn't overly pricey, the restaurant looked chic, and I could tell the food was likely fantastic. However, I was too nervous to fully appreciate the taste. I could barely focus on anything other than smiling and nodding at Emily's stories, and honestly, I didn't enjoy the meal at all. After we left the restaurant, Emily glanced at my face and asked,
Shane, are you not a fan of Italian food? You looked a bit tense while eating.
It seemed my nervousness hadn't gone unnoticed. Feeling bad for not fully appreciating the lovely place Emily had chosen, I shook my head vigorously. No, it was delicious. It's just, I haven't been on many dates with women before, so I was really nervous. The more I wanted you to have a good time, the more my mind went blank. For a man in his 30s, it was a pretty pathetic thing to admit. But instead of looking annoyed or mocking me, Emily smiled warmly, like a blooming flower.
That's not true at all. So, what should we do next? How about we check out that area over there?
Emily reached for my arm. Reflexively, I pulled my hand back. I appreciated her gesture, but ever since my accident, I had avoided letting anyone touch my hand or even see it if possible. It was a subconscious reaction, but it must have upset Emily. When I looked at her nervously, she was gazing at me with a sad expression.
Sorry, I acted without thinking, but...
She hesitated, struggling to find the words. Looking me straight in the eye, Emily spoke with resolve.
If you think it's something to be self-conscious about, maybe you don't need to. Grandpa told me, you got injured protecting someone, right? When Grandpa drinks, he often talks about you. And during those times, even though he seemed pained, He always looks so proud.
Her words left me wide-eyed in surprise. I had asked Kevin to keep the matter of my finger to himself. But it turned out he had been telling his granddaughter about the accident for years. Knowing this didn't bother me at all. On the contrary, I could feel the respect Kevin had for me, even as he wrestled with guilt. That alone made me feel a sense of relief. I looked at my uneven fingers, different from those of most people. Then, I reached out my hand toward Emily. "Shall we go? This time, I'll show you around. Here's a place I've always wanted to visit." Emily took my hand, and we began walking side by side at a leisurely pace. From her hand, I felt a nostalgic warmth, a human connection I hadn't experienced in a long time. The next day, people at work started saying I seemed different. Even I noticed that my voice carried more energy, and I smiled more than I used to. Before, I never used my fingers to point at things or check a computer screen. But since the day of my date with Emily, I had stopped being ashamed of my fingers. I was deeply grateful to Emily for giving me the confidence I had long been lacking. A year after we started dating, Emily and I found ourselves dining at the same restaurant where we had first met. As we finished our course meal and laughed over small talk, I reached into my bag and pulled out a box. Opening it in front of Emily, I said, "Will you stay with me forever?" Even though I no longer felt nervous when we were alone together, proposing was another story. I was sweating, my mouth felt dry, and my heart pounded harder than ever before. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she gently nodded.
Of course, I will. I'm looking forward to our future together.
Wiping my own tears, I slid the ring onto Emily's finger with my uneven hand,